Hey, Husker fans, welcome to another episode of the Husker Big Red podcast with Chris Peterson and Danny Gillette. As always, go Big Red. Good morning, Husker fans, and welcome back to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. I'm Chris Peterson, and joining me as always is Danny Gillette, and we're back on this Monday morning for another episode of our podcast, and we're going to discuss the Nebraska baseball run, which came to an end on Sunday. We got a few other nuggets to talk about. The national media fall in love with the Nebraska football team here coming into the 2024 season, and also just a little bit of recruiting news. Not a ton of stuff going on for the Huskers this past weekend, but we have a couple of things to cover there. So before we get to that stuff, please make sure that you guys hit the subscribe button. Make sure that you hit the like button, get into the comments section, and let us know what you think. Let us know what future content you'd like to see. But Danny, how you doing on this Monday morning?
A little bit sore. I did a 5,000 meter row on a rowing machine on Saturday, and my arms and shoulders are. I feel like I pitched on Sunday almost. I'm very sore, but I'm happy to be here. It's June. Summer weather is upon us, and the preseason media hype for Nebraska has never failed us, and it certainly didn't fail us this week.
Yeah, there's always it seems to be, always a lot of hype. There's a lot of hype with Nebraska fans usually, but this year, you actually have a lot of national media members kind of drinking the Kool-Aid too, which I think is a little interesting. But first, let's start with baseball.
Yeah,
The season finally came to an end. Florida just, Nebraska's pitching staff could not hold up against, the Florida Gators offense, and things just fell apart really yesterday when they went to the bullpen. You could see it from the beginning. The Huskers came out and, grabbed a 2-run lead in the first inning, and you could see just from the start that it was going to be a tough day for Jackson Brockett. So that was disappointing, but really the pitching never. None of the three starters really did that well. McConaughey did better. He had 10 strikeouts, but he still got Nebraska in a 4-0 hole against Niagara that they had to come back from. So, I did have a little more hope for the pitching staff coming into the weekend, but the offense had to produce too, and they had their opportunities. Friday, we're down 4-2 in the 8th inning. You have the bases loaded, get nothing. Yesterday they had the bases loaded again, and they got, they did score runs in that inning, but there was bases loaded, I think, with 1 out and get no runs out of that situation. And you just can't come up empty in those spots. And it was unfortunate, but it was a great run for this team either way. You win a Big Ten tournament championship, but to me, I don't care whether it's regular season or tournament championship. If you win the Big Ten, that's a successful season. So, this is a good year for Nebraska. They had the Big Ten pitcher of the year, Brett Sears, who's a senior and not going to be coming back next year. So that's going to be disappointing. It will be interesting to see what the roster looks like. But overall, I thought this team was a success.
And there were some that were saying that Florida wasn't good because they were just barely over 500. Well, we got a taste of SEC baseball on Sunday. And Florida's bats were incredible. Our pitching struggled, but, I tip my cap to Florida because in the second game, Sunday, they showed out. And they were just able to wear down the pitching staff on Sunday. Like you said, early leads by the opposition, put Nebraska in the hole all weekend. And, even going back to the Big Ten tournament, the starters often struggled to get things settled down early. So that was still a theme going throughout the course of this weekend. But overall, a very solid season. Nothing to necessarily be mad about. I know some were upset, but the Big Ten tournament champions, a solid season from Brett Sears. Like you said, National Pitcher of the Year. I think we can put the Fire Will Bolt pitchforks to rest for at least another year. And so I'm curious to see what they do next year. A lot of talent on the roster, some holes that they're going to need to fill, but certainly a step in the right direction and a building block for a program and a coach that, quite frankly, needed one after some missed opportunities in previous years.
Yeah, it was. They brought in Rob Childress, which proved to be a good move. Yep. They do need to, solidify the bullpen a bit, and it'll be interesting to see how they, what they kind of do with the rotation. Because McConaughey will probably be the number one, and then you've got, Jackson Brockett will be back. So it'll be interesting. They do have some nice pieces, coming back in their, position at the position infield and stuff like that. So I do think they have a chance to, make it back to the NCAA tournament next year, but we're going to have to, get some other arms, I think, for those. It's important to have those 1, 2, 3 pitchers for those weekend series, especially those 1 and 2s, which they really dominated at this year, Sears and McConaughey. That's why they won the majority, almost all of their Big Ten, series this season. So we'll see how that all works out. But it was a good year for Will Bolton, those guys. So yeah, it did remind me a little bit of the basketball season, kind of giving over the hump. And I do think they probably should have gotten past Florida, but it is what it is. They didn't play their best baseball this weekend. So.
And I feel like at this stage of the tournament, every game is tough. At this stage of the season, every game is tough. And Florida's a good team, despite the loss earlier this weekend. They do have solid bats. I believe they had the 7th most home runs in the country or something like that. So they're no slouch. And now it's just about building off of next season and trying to see if they can keep that consistency going. And on a baseball note, actually, Spencer Schwellenbach made his debut with the Atlanta Braves last week, so that was interesting to see. He lasted 5 innings in his debut. He gave up 3 runs through 88 pitches, 5 hits with 5 strikeouts and a walk. So a little bit of a mixed bag, but it was still good to see him make his debut. And, it just goes to show that this program is capable of producing major leaguers. And I think we're going to see some from this year's team, hopefully in the near future.
Yeah, I definitely think, Sears has a good chance. I don't know as much about some of the other guys, but I definitely think he's got a chance.
Josh Caron, I think, will probably get at least drafted.
Yeah, for sure. I think he's an underclass or not.
Yeah.
I think he has eligibility. So,
yeah.
That's always interesting how it works, too, because teams can draft you and you can
kind
of decide to go. It's
kind of like different. College hockey. A little bit.
Hockey and baseball are a lot different in the draft process than, so that kind of makes the roster building a little more complicated. So we'll see how that kind of transpires over the offseason, but the Huskers definitely have some momentum, and I think you can say that they're as good of a program right now as there is in the Big Ten, but you have to get beyond that because in terms of baseball, the Big Ten is by far the worst power conference. It's nowhere near the Big 12, the ACC, the SEC. Part of that probably has to do with weather, you know what I mean, and just easier to recruit and that type of thing. And it goes back to even just at the high school level. I mean, those schools can play baseball all year round where, Nebraska, it's a little tough at times during the winter and stuff.
Yeah, that Florida team's probably been playing baseball since January. I mean,
the SEC does play like 6 more. They play 30 conference games. The SEC does, and the Big Ten plays 24. So I mean, that goes to show you right there.
There is an advantage to that, and plus they can literally practice all year round. So
yeah, and that's where the better recruits tend to go. So I mean, there are some challenges, but you can get to the College World Series with the Big Ten program. It's just very difficult to do. But if anybody's going to do it, I think Nebraska has as good a shot as anyone in the Big Ten right now. So, just to switch gears a little bit, so we got the national media talking about Nebraska, drinking the Nebraska Kool-Aid. So, where they kind of come up with this, the USA Today post-spring top 25, the Huskers are ranked 25th. Joel Klatt had him in the post-spring top 25. I think Athlon Sports did as well. JD Pickle even was talking about, Nebraska could be 7-0 going into the Ohio State game, which, he was kind of, building up that hope for that. But I mean, to me, that's getting a little ahead of ourselves. But, why do you think that the Nebraska, or I guess the national media is kind of drinking the Kool-Aid like Nebraska football fans usually do?
Because I think they see, and I think a lot of it relies on the potential of Dylan Raiola. But I think they're starting to see what we're seeing, which is a damn good quarterback. The problem is that they're not as jaded and hurt by the experiences of Nebraska football like we are. So I think they're selling a bit high, and we're kind of being pessimistic until we see the results on the field. Because we've been here before with this national media hype and the balloons and the parties and the rah-rah-rahs, and we've fallen flat. Like I was just watching some clips of the South Alabama game. I believe it was J.D. Spielman's touchdown, and we were ranked 25th, and we barely beat South Alabama. So anyway, it's just I can see why the national media are buying it because they're taking a look at it from an outsider's perspective. And Dylan Raiola is good, and this roster is good. I mean, I think Michael Terry's Instagram post with Dylan Raiola in the picture yesterday is a testament to that. I think we're going to get some good talent here. I just kind of have a little bit of a wait and see approach. I want them to be good. I'm not rooting for them to be bad. I want them to be ranked and all that stuff. But I think it's a little bit easier for the national media to kind of run with this storyline than Husker fans who have been hurt and betrayed and suffered through this before.
Yeah, I think a big part of it too is the Matt Rule effect because at Temple he went from 1 win to 6 or 7. In Baylor they went from 1 win to 6 or 7, and then like 10. So, I mean, he's got a pretty. I do think that his track record of those second year improvements, is really giving Nebraska a lot of credit, or credibility, I guess, among these national pundits. People like Joel Klatt, I mean, he talked about that specifically, and Dylan Raiola is the other part of it. And that's something that Joel Klatt mentioned. And we've all mentioned this, but, with all the turnovers, the quarterback turnovers, the 4 games last year that were decided by 3 points or in overtime or whatever, there was, 4 or 5. I mean, really, the Colorado game, Colorado and Michigan, outside of those games, Nebraska was in every game and really could have won all those. So,
honestly, Colorado, we could have won too if we could have held on the damn ball.
Yeah, if they didn't like, self-destruct every time they got inside the 30-yard line. It was like outside the 30. I shouldn't say that because Jeff actually had some pretty bad interceptions that gave Colorado. Like I think right before halftime too, like threw an interception on their side of the field. Which
reminds me of the Minnesota game when they threw an interception right before halftime in the red zone. But anyway,
that was that right there was when I was like, about Jeff Sims. I was like, this isn't going to work out like we thought it was going to.
I've seen this movie before. That and the fact that Minnesota's final touchdown. I was like, I've seen this movie before. I'm not sure I want to see it again. I hate this movie. Let's get a new one.
But from Matt Rule's perspective, he's like, I wasn't here for all that, so. For me, he's talked a lot about how he thinks the program is really far ahead in the second year. They were 5-7, but they really were that close to being, 9-3 or 8-4, whatever. They were very close to making the bowl game and doing all that stuff in year 1. So I do think, that does make me excited to see what, because this is going to be, year 2, everybody's going to be even, farther ahead, I think, in what Matt Rule wants to do. Nebraska's going to be closer to what Matt Rule wants, it to be. He upgraded the quarterback position. I feel pretty good looking at the depth chart. There's not like a position where I'm like, oh man, Nebraska really doesn't have, the depth that it needs there. I mean, sure, there's spots where guys, could step up, maybe like linebacker is a spot where they're going to have to rely on some young guys, potentially in the secondary, maybe a young guy or two, but really the offensive defensive lines, they're pretty set. They're pretty set at running back, receiver, tight end, as long as quarterback is Raiola, as long as Dylan Raiola can just produce like he has so far on the field, like I think there's a pretty good chance of this coming true. So we'll see. I really don't want to see Nebraska ranked in the actual like coaches poll or the AP poll. I don't think they will be. I think they're going to have to beat Colorado before they get actually ranked in one of those polls. But just win games. I could care less about the rankings. I just want them to win. But it's interesting to see, people that I really respect. It's especially Joel Klatt. The USA Today and some of those other polls, it's like whatever, they've ranked Nebraska before. I don't really put too much credence into it, but Joel Klatt is the guy that I think knows the game as well as anybody. I think he's as good an analyst, as there is in the sport. So if he's putting Nebraska in his top 25, like I think that's legitimate.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see, once Nebraska starts playing, how many players, how many recruits will follow suit, especially if things go well. Say hypothetically 6-0 start the season. What will that do for recruiting? And we've already seen what they've been able to do off of a 5-7 season. If they can just put together, a solid start or even a bowl game appearance, then recruiting will instantly shoot up. And I think Dylan Raiola is a big part of that. I think looking at not only Dylan Raiola, but the fact that TJ Lateef is now in the room. Technically not in the room, but as a quarterback committed. Danny Kalin's here. I think once you take care of the quarterback position, everything else kind of falls into place, and we're seeing that. I am wondering, how much of a chance Nebraska has of landing Terry and what his price point will be. I don't think he's going to come cheap, but the Instagram story post made me hopeful yesterday.
Yeah, that did make me hopeful. I thought that was
the last time Dylan Raiola posted a picture like that, it was a Dante Dowdell, and now Dante Dowdell's here, so who knows?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think Dylan's definitely, doing some recruiting there. But yeah, it does concern me a little bit that Michael Terry said like NIL is such an important factor in his recruitment, but that's just the reality of 5-star. Like if you are recruiting a 5-star prospect and you don't have an NIL plan, like you don't have a shot. So I'd be very surprised if I don't think that Nebraska would probably even be in it at this point if they didn't have
Right.
some sort of NIL pitch, because I'm sure they went over that when he did on his visit.
Right.
Like this is the base salary you get at Nebraska, and there can be more. I mean, Dylan Raiola is not getting the base salary. I mean, he's definitely getting $1.5 million. I mean, I don't have any confirmation of that, but there's like a
No, but
lot of.
he's getting
I mean, that's like the open rumor. I mean,
nice check to come here. I do feel confident in saying that. And again,
and people have said that number too, so I don't think that that's like out of nowhere.
No, and the other part of this too is, we're talking about a high school kid saying these types of things, and you never know what's going to happen. I mean, I was in high school once back in the day, and I said a bunch of stupid stuff, and it never happened. And I'm not saying what he said is stupid, but just don't take everything that they say at face value either. They're still trying to figure all this out. I mean, I couldn't imagine if I had, that much money in front of me at, 17, 18 years old, what I would do with it. I'd probably blow it on some video games or something. But anyway, just take what these high school kids say, not what they, maybe a little bit of a grain of salt, because this must be an interesting process to navigate. And I always hope that for any of these kids, they have good, people advising them, and because this is a tough world in college football right now if you don't have the right support system.
Yep, it definitely is people, wanting to take advantage of you and, selling you stuff that's not real and trying to take, some of your probably more of your money than they need to, with agents and stuff like that. So, yeah, there's a lot of shysters out there trying to take advantage of these kids and get in on their money. So, you're right about they have to have the right people around them. But yeah, Michael Terry's got, visits with Texas and Texas A&M. Oregon's in the mix. He talked about, I think, coming back for the Colorado game, which I think would be a positive thing. I would like to get him back for like the cookout or whatever this summer. I think that's going to be another key event for Nebraska. And this weekend isn't going to be as big, but June 14th and June 21st, the Huskers are really going to be ramping things up, on the recruiting front. Team guys are starting to take official visits. One in particular for Nebraska on the Nebraska side of things, Chase Loftin was at Missouri this weekend for his official visit. That was his first of 4. He's also visiting Nebraska, Texas A&M, and Florida State. And he visited Missouri also this spring. The Tigers, of course, are coming off a top 10 season, a Cotton Bowl victory. So they're kind of trending up, and they have no shortage of NIL money. I think they've actually, the state of Missouri, like passed legislation that kind of amplified their NIL efforts, kind of like what Tennessee did. So they're not the only state that's done that. But at any rate, the quote from Chase Loftin after his visit, Mizzou is definitely going to be part of the decision. I mean, I don't know really what that means, if they're going to be like one of the teams that has a hat on the table. But I don't know. Are you super worried about Missouri after this visit? What do you think about the Tigers' chances of getting Chase Loftin out of Nebraska?
I think they're pretty good because they have a lot of money. They do have a lot of money. And am I worried? No. If we had, 0 tight ends on the roster and we were struggling at the position, then I would be a little bit worried. And I understand Loftin can probably play more than tight end, but, at the end of the day, some of these recruits are not going to land in state, whether it be due to positional numbers or whether it be just due to money. And tight end is not a position that we necessarily need. And, there is a chance that Missouri will outbid Nebraska for Loftin, and, that's going to happen. So I'm not terribly worried. I think we're solid at the tight end position, and we are going to miss out on some of these recruits. And yes, I know you always want to keep the in-state kids home, but you're going to, miss on some. You're going to miss on a few. So I think this coaching staff has done a much better job, obviously, than the previous staff of, kind of ramping up the in-state recruiting efforts. And I'm not too worried. If he goes to Missouri, best of luck to him. No ill will. He made the best decision for him. And as far as for Nebraska, I think we're pretty set in the tight end room. So I'm not too worried. If whatever happens, happens. And right now we're in a good place with the roster, like you said earlier. So, I would love to have him for sure. But if he goes elsewhere, I wouldn't be too, mad or upset.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I wouldn't and I'm not wouldn't be mad at him. I would be, I do definitely think this is a guy they want in their class. So
Yeah.
he was on my top 5 list of must land guys. I mean, yeah, it's not going to be the end of the world if they miss on him with Carter Nelson, but man, if you had him and Chase Loftin, and I'm just always about having as much talent coming up as possible.
But I also have Bear Teddy coming up. So
Yeah, for sure. I just want them all, but
yeah,
I really think Chase Loftin is a unique guy, and I think he's underranked because of where he's at in Nebraska. You don't see many guys that are like 6'6" and can do the things that he can do
right.
athletically. So yeah, there's a reason why all these big time programs are after him. Missouri is definitely becoming that, and it's going to be interesting because I don't think this is going to be the last time that we see Missouri and Nebraska butting heads. They're both trying to really establish themselves as the power program. It's going to be tough though. It's kind of a bummer for Nebraska because Missouri's never been, that strong, and so I think there were opportunities for them to get into Missouri, and other programs have tried to, start recruiting more in St. Louis. So we'll see if that continues. But I do think we'll see, them butting heads with the Tigers here over the next few years. They got a lot of money in the SEC, and Eli Drinkwitz has really recruited a nice roster. I mean, they got like Luther Burden, who's like a 5-star kid. I think he's out of Missouri, and they beat everybody for him. Like he was one of the top ranked players in the entire country. So it's not going to be easy. That does worry me a little bit, but I still give a slight edge to Nebraska. Because like, we've said before, everybody always has a good time on their visits. So, I mean, I don't know if Chase Loftin learned anything new. I mean, from his kind of comments on different things, it's like, I want to see how coaches use me. I want to, kind of just have that experience one more time just to finalize things and can kind of get a final picture, in his head of that decision. So, I mean, yeah, I think Missouri's definitely going to be in the mix. One of the thought processes, they'll probably have a hat on the table, when he makes his announcement or whatever, but we'll see. Like I said, I'll believe it when I see it, for one of these programs to beat Matt Rule for an in-state recruit. So Chase Loftin and Christian Jones, at this point, I still see them being Huskers. There's work to do, but last year at this time, there was work to do with Carter Nelson, Isaiah McMorris, and Davon Hall, and the Huskers got it done. There was work to do in December of 2023 with Malachi Coleman when Steve Wiltfong projected him to Colorado, and Matt Rule got that one done. So I
2022,
still,
not 2023, but I get your point. I'm just clearing it up for the folks that are watching.
Yeah. But same thing. I mean, so when it's been crunch time, Matt Rule's found a way to get it done, like he got done with Dylan Raiola. So that I don't think that was really necessarily him. That was just more Dylan deciding he wanted to come to Nebraska. But
Dylan did us a massive favor with that, I think.
But the point still stands with the in-state kids. So we'll see.
I mean, and one guy I'm looking at and will continue to follow is Ryman Ziebert. I think Nebraska, should they miss out on Chase Loftin, definitely turn their attention to Ziebert. He's a 3-star recruit right now. He's ranked, he's ranked in 87 numerically in the 24/7 sports rankings. Nebraska's got a little bit of competition. Duke, Stanford, and Wisconsin are, some of the schools that are kind of, in the top group for his recruitment, but he's a guy that I'm watching as well. The 5th overall athlete in the state of Nebraska, according to the composite ranking, the 38th overall tight end in the class. So he's a guy that I'm watching for as well. That's another reason why I'm not too worried about Loftin, because although Ziebert is maybe not as skilled as Loftin, he's still a pretty good player. So there could be a nice backup option there for Nebraska.
Yeah, for sure. I think and they might end up. It wouldn't shock me if they ended up taking both of them. You never. Especially with tight ends and teams that want to run the football. Like I said, the fullback is not a thing. I know people want to make it into a thing at Nebraska and Matt Rule with the fullback camp. It's not a thing. The fullback position is really not a thing. It's tight ends. Tight ends playing H-back. I mean, go watch Michigan. That's what it is nowadays. I mean, you can add and recruit some fullbacks, and maybe you'll get a really good one that's worthwhile playing. But like the days of having scholarship players be fullbacks, like that's not happening. And I know we want to have the fullback position, but it's basically tight ends are playing it. So that's why it's not that surprising to see Nebraska looking at 2 or 3 tight ends in the class, because they want to throw the football and throw it to these guys, but they want to use them too as players in the running game. Tight ends are really valuable on special teams a lot of the time. So I know people don't like that. I know it's like not popular to say, but the fullback thing is totally, to me, it's totally been overblown. It's not a thing anymore.
Well, for some reason, I know why, given the history with Nebraska, but Nebraska fans just absolutely love the idea of a fullback,
I know.
and I think it's time to throw that out the window.
I mean, I like the idea of a lead blocker,
Yeah.
like, but that doesn't need to be it's just it to have a guy on your roster that just does that. It's hard to do that anymore. And Bonner was that. They said Bonner was that a little bit last year. He's he's now playing receiver again.
Isaac Dickey, I don't know where he would necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, he could have a role as like a fullback, but like I said, I think you have to be able to do more things, like Kyle Juszczyk, and he's basically, I mean, they call him a fullback, but he's basically an H-back, he's basically an H-back tight end because he catches, what makes him dangerous. He catches the ball really well, and he's also a really great blocker. So, I mean, I feel like that's kind of the new, where the position's trending. So I'm not trying to be down on fullbacks or anything. It's just how it is. So, I mean, if you look why Nebraska's trying to recruit, so many tight ends, well, that's a reason why, because there's not very many, Isaac Dickey probably can be a fullback, but, most of the time those guys just aren't scholarship level players. So, we'll see how that goes moving forward. But, you're going to see lots of tight ends. Yeah. John Kuhn. Yeah. The Shippensburg.
Oh yeah. I used to love watching him wrestle his way through the offensive line and all the Green Bay fans chanting in the crowd, Kuhn, and it was great.
But even him, I'm pretty sure he was like a tailback in college,
Yeah, he was
D3 or whatever. So, but yeah, I mean, it's a great position. I definitely like I'm supportive of a lead blocker in a lot of instances, which Nebraska did use last year. So it's not like it's totally gone, but I just am saying, like, from a recruiting from a recruiting perspective, they're not going to. That's why you're seeing Nebraska sign more tight ends, because they basically, not all of them. I mean, Carter Nelson's, you're not going to be throwing him in the backfield to block, but that is part of the idea with some of these guys. He definitely can, he will, and Thomas Fidone does too. I mean, that's part of the position, but but there's a difference between like a Carter Nelson and another tight end. But at any rate,
and also you're going to see the offense completely change this year from last year. I think. I mean, now we actually have a competent quarterback and really good wide receivers. I don't think we're going to need to run the football a ton, or still run the football, but not as much as we did last year. So that kind of takes the fullback out of the equation as well in terms of running, maybe blocking, but as long as you have good blocking tight ends, I think you would be set in this offense.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all works out with Raiola, and guys are getting back to campus here this month. The new guys are coming in. The rest of the freshmen coming in this month, getting back to work. So we'll have more stuff coming up. There'll be a lot more recruiting news, I think, over the next few weeks. So we'll be covering all that. So make sure you guys don't miss any of our podcasts. So make sure that you hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Like I said, make sure you check out HuskerBigRed.com too. We have a lot of great content there. And as always, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.